purpose of this video is to help you learn how to make an opening for a PSI session. Now, the reason this video is being made is because an opening is a very important section of the entire PSI session. And a very tempting thing to do at times as a PSI leader is to kind of just rush into the main body in your PSI sessions. And that is a very tempting thing to do, to be honest. But you want to make sure you have your opening, and you want to make sure you include that in your session, because it's a very useful tool to help you have the students kind of prepare themselves for what's going to be in the session, and to kind of see that where maybe they are in terms of what they're learning, and where they are in terms of what they understand and what they need help on. It's always kind of good to use it as kind of like a warm-up. And similar to maybe if you think about an analogy such as a sport, maybe you always want to make sure that you have kind of a stretching session, or maybe a warm-up lap around a court or a field or whatever it may be, to kind of get your body prepared. And that's similar or analogous to a PSI session, having an opening to kind of warm up students to what's going to be in the main body, to kind of see what they're going to be, what should be expected, and kind of where they are in terms of what they need exact help with. And so basically, obviously, these based on the far left column here, the time of the opening session doesn't have to be very long, only about 5 to 10 minutes, and it's just a nice little short session. And of course, it could be shorter or longer if it needs to be, but I would say from my personal experience, it's usually not over 5 minutes, I guess, depending on what it is you're doing. It may run a little short, may run a little long, and that's okay, because all the other session, or all the other components of the section, such as the main body and closing, may be a little bit flexible, right? Because you have these kind of 35 to 45, 5 to 10, you have these ranges based on, if one takes longer, you might be able to shrink another one, so on and so forth. And that's why this whole kind of lesson plan, I think, is pretty useful. And so, of course, like I explained in a previous video, that the learning objectives are basically just going to summarize kind of what you put here in the learning activity and the collaborative strategy. And basically, you might wonder, well, I don't know what to put as a learning activity for an opener. And that's not uncommon, right? I mean, it can seem kind of confusing at times what exact strategy you want to use, or what exact tool you want to use as an opener, because constantly I feel like it's just easy, like I mentioned earlier, to just kind of focus on the main body, right? Because that is the meat of the session, right? That is the main part of the session. But I think some good learning activities to help you learn about, which I'll go into more detail later on, is just things that help students kind of get prepared, or that help get you prepared, or a combination of both. I think good things to use here are things like Venn diagrams that explain or help have students basically compare and contrast certain things to kind of see where their level of understanding is based on the comparison of those two topics. I think things like comparing notes is a good thing to do to see kind of where students are, and that's a especially useful one, because if you're a PSI leader, a lot of times you'll have students show up to the session that are from different sections of the particular course that you're teaching, and they might be ahead of each other or behind each other, and they may not always be on the same page in terms of what they're currently learning in class. And so things like that help you learn more about maybe what it is that they're exactly learning. That way that you can actually tailor your session around it better. And a good collaborative learning strategy that I always usually like to use for the opener, and again, this changes based on what the learning activity is, but I know one that I usually like to use is maybe turn to a partner. I think clusters or assigned discussion leader, as we'll get into later, are also good ones for these. But again, I'll get more into the specifics in later videos. But basically, yeah, this video is basically just talking about the opening, and why it's important, why you want one, and how you would construct one, right? And a good way to construct an opening may be through a PowerPoint, or maybe through just writing things on the board in your session, or writing things maybe on a whiteboard virtually if you're holding a virtual session. It's really up to you. You can actually, what I like to do personally is I like to have this Word document with a lesson plan on it, and then I like to use a PowerPoint in conjunction with that to make it easier to kind of for the people who show up to the sessions, learn more about it and stuff like that. So that's basically the kind of background and importance of an opening, and why you would want to use one, and how it can be useful for not only you, but for the students who show up to the session, and why you always want to have one. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time when I talk about the main body.